So today's video, I'm going to teach you how to lift weights to grow muscle. And it sounds kind of obvious and almost like this title is a little bit insulting, but I find a lot of people train hard, but they don't grow. And in this video, I'm going to explain why that is. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name's Tom Sergi, and I run the Gorilla Platoon, an online physique transformation program, where we get results like this. So that's one part of the reason why I'm able to talk about what we're going to talk about today. The other is, obviously, this is the title that we know we're going to speak about. The other is, this is how I used to look in 2020, around June time. So, what's that, about 4 years? Rough weight, about 68, 69 kg. I am 5'8", 173 centimeters if you work in centimeters. And now, as of like literally right now, this is how I look. So we've managed to add tissue to the frame everywhere. About 88.5 now over the course of bulking, cutting. So I've learned a lot along the way about what works, why I was, and bear in mind, I've been training for years at this point, boys. I'm not even joking. I've been lifting weights all my life, and I still look like this because obviously we were doing a lot of things wrong, but one of them was how we were actually lifting the weight itself. So we've learned, we've done the trials and tribulations, we've beefed up. We're going to continue beefing up to around 92.3, and then we're going to cut back down again and reveal the tissue underneath. Them erector spinae muscles fucking growing out. Stern lower back. So what we're going to show you now, I'm just going to jump out of this and allow myself the ability to draw. The analogy I will use is when people try to grow muscle, I want them to think of themselves like a plane. And it's their workout is the journey, all right? So you are a plane, okay? And what you should do is go from A to B, okay? And it should be the most efficient way possible. Maybe you've got a curve around a fucking war zone at the minute, but you've got to go all the way from A to B in as efficient point as possible. What a lot of people do in their training is they still do this part, the effort part, but where they land is for some reason they'll do it, but they just can't seem to get to here. They always land like a mile away from the actual target zone, so got to get out of their fucking plane and walk to the zone. They just cannot for the life of them. They can get the range, but they just cannot land on the target where they need to. So they've just burned energy and fuel, but never really got to the point. This is what people's workouts look like, because they are not efficient in the way they train. They train hard, effort there, absolutely effort is there, boys. I mean, not all of you. I've seen a lot of people train in the gym. People, to be honest, people train like pussies. But people train like pussies with also not intent and direct execution on working muscles. So the issue we have with this is all the work you're putting in, you're still not going to be able to get to B where you need to really grow the tissue and to maximize your time and effort that has gone into the gym, which if you're passionate about this, if you want to get in good shape, that is quite fucking painful because you're going all the time. People know you go all the time, but you still look the same as you did last year, which is really, really frustrating because you don't want that. You want to be in a productive off season, grow, cut down, show the growth. Rinse, repeat, year after year until you thickened out and you look like a man rather than a fucking 16-year-old boy. You actually grow into like a thicker human being. And that's what we want to do here for you. So what I'm going to do is explain how to train each main muscle group. And I'm going to bring the science and put it into our terms and our speak and understanding so you can execute and use it. Because I feel like there's a bit of a gap between like bro knowledge, like, do this exercise, because this is the exercise everyone does. Do flat dumbbell chest press, because everyone does it. But then you've got the science nerds who are like, the function of the chest is X, and there's no bridge in between. So you've got science weirdos that just do that, and then the bros in between that just move the load from A to B. I want to bridge the gap and create a video that's kind of like, it bridges the two, so it's a bit of like the bro and the science put a little bit together in our language, in our speak, so you can then land from A to B with all your workouts and be as efficient as humanly possible. So, let's fucking dance. The first muscle group we're going to look at is the pecs or the chest. Now, every time we go through this, I'm going to explain three things. Where the muscle starts, known as the origin, where it finishes, known as the insertion, and the function, what that muscle is there on your body to do, what that is. So when it comes to the chest, we can see it starts here. If we look at the way the fibers run, and also up here as well, it runs and it attaches here onto your humerus, onto your upper arm. And the function of the chest is to essentially pull this way. That is it. To pull the humerus towards the midline of the body. To pull the insertion back to where the origin has come from. This should not be complicated. It doesn't need to be complicated. We just, where the muscle starts, don't even think insertion. Just think, where does it start? Where does it finish? Well, we need to bring the two together, and we need to do so under load. But if we now understand that to train the chest, you need to move your arm from left to right, not from up to down, it's going to completely change the trajectory in the way that you are training. Second to that, how many times have you gone into a big heavy exercise and you're driving the load from your hands? When you start to drive it from your hands, what's the first joint that's going to move? It's the elbow joint, right? So that's going to move first. But everything above the arm here is irrelevant because it doesn't attach there. It attaches onto the upper arm. So your only focus when you train your chest wants to be, what is my upper arm doing in relation to the muscle? And we need to be moving from left to right, not up and down. Let's show you an example. So I'm going to show you two examples, and this first one will make a lot of sense, and you need to be programming this. This exercise here does exactly that. Drive the upper arm towards the midline of the body. The pump you get off this, the contraction you get off this is insane if done correctly. But how people will do this exercise is they will drive the load from their hands. And if you drive it from your hands, the tension is going to be on your delts. If you think, keep my chest up, drive my upper arm towards my chest, you're going to be training and hitting the function of the chest. That's what we need to be thinking about here. So I want you to always start with this form of exercise. Do it with cables. Do it with a machine ideally. If you have to do it with dumbbells, then we can. With the dumbbell, you have to understand it gets harder towards the bottom, so think about the stretch rather than as much of the squeeze because the tension is going to drop off towards the top. Now let's go into our main money mover exercise because you can understand when I show it you like this, yeah, that makes a shit ton of sense. I know what you're saying there. Function of the chest, move your upper arm towards the midline of the body, side to side. The machine is set up to go side to side, but what about when the machine is not set up like that? And this is why this gets confusing. Let's roll with that. Okay, so we're going to show you on an incline press. Now, this could be done with dumbbells or a machine itself. The way you want to set up with this so that you don't end up using your shoulders, first of all, it will determine where your sternum is positioned. Because if your sternum is collapsed in, it's going to be very, very hard for you to drive your arm across the body because the shoulder is the most upward point, so you're going to end up driving through that. So you want to keep the sternum up. Now, understanding that, obviously, to train the chest, to bring the humerus towards the midline of the body, it also works in reverse. You can train a muscle through the lengthened position. So what you're going to think about here is pulling your upper arm away from the midline of the body to fully pull those fibers around the rib cage and stretch the living daylights out of them under load. Under load. That's how they will grow. You must separate the down and the upward phase because that way you can do the function of the chest. You can pull the humerus away from the body. You can stop, and then you can now think consciously to drive the humerus towards the midline of the body. If you rush this, you'll go like this. Bang, bang. You're telling me you controlled that and, done the function of the chest under load? Probably not, right? So you want to think about this here. Now your only mission inside your brain is to drive your upper arms, your biceps towards your chest. Boom. Let this follow suit. It's not going to stay out here if you drive your upper arms. You're not going to invertedly prolapse your own arms by doing this. No, you're going to drive your bicep, and naturally this is going to follow suit because it's attached, and it has to. And because you're driving this here, this will follow suit here. So every time you train your chest, you are not moving the load up and down. You are moving your upper arms side to side. The function of the chest, move the upper arm towards the midline of the body. If you apply that every time you train your chest, I tell you now, your chest will grow. Your connection with it will be infinitely better. I know this because I've literally applied it and seen some nice results off it. And this is what I'm coaching to my guys week in, week out when they send me form clips. I'm like, stop pressing from your hands. You can see it a mile off. Because what people will do if they press from their hands, they'll get towards the top of the rep and they won't finish at the contraction. They'll keep going. Most of you probably do this, and you can feel it when you press. You can press until your arm comes all the way up as far out the socket as possible. At that point, there is no tension on the chest, and it's all on the delt. Once your bicep has met your pec, your job is done. Pause, repeat the process until you've maxed out and absolutely toasted it. Just as a side note as well, once you nail this, you're obviously going to think about training to fucking failure and your last reps lasting in and around the space of 3 to 4 seconds. So that's the pecs. So now we understand to train them, we're not going to press the load from A to B. We're only going to worry about our humerus. I'm going to drive it from the insertion back towards the origin point. That's it. That's how we're going to train our chest. No if, buts, or maybes. Nice and simple. Moving on now to the lats. The function of the lats is to essentially pull your upper arm down towards your hip. There is a few other functions of it, but under the mindset of growing muscle, growing the lats, you only want to think of it in this sense. What is the upper arm doing? Because the lats, also very similar to the chest, so the coaching cues are going to be slightly universal on this. The lats start here, they also start here, on your hip, okay? And they insert here onto your humerus. So again, you're not going to snatch loads down from your hands. If you snatch it from your hands, you're going to move your elbow joint first, and you're going to burn your bicep out before you've even got your elbow anywhere closer towards the body. We're going to come on to an exercise example in a minute, but I want you to think you need to drive your humerus towards your hip. In this analogy, you can think your arm again has been cut off at the elbow. You're going to drive your elbow towards your hip, bring in the insertion back towards the origin point. The function is just simply to move the arm down towards the hip. And if you just do this now, take your arm up, drive it down towards your hip, you'll feel your lat get nice and juicy, crunch and squeeze. So it makes sense, right? Well, let's go on to an exercise example. So I tend to program a single arm pull down for a lot of my clients. And the reason being is lat pull down, I program it as well. But lat pull down, you're having to do 2 of these at the same time. It's just more for your brain to think about. If we do just one as one of the exercises, your only mission here is to think, I just need to drive my elbow to my hip. Nice and simple. Bang. That lat is as short as it will ever be because my elbow is all the way to my hip. My lat attaches onto here, and I've got here as close to the starting of the origin point. When people say wide arm pull-ups and wide arm grips create a wide back, it's literal bullshit. It's the absolute polar opposite, because if you can keep your arm close to the body and drive it towards the hip, you can't get the lat any shorter, right? So in the analogy of a bicep curl, it's the equivalent of getting the bicep all the way up here. What people are saying is, if let's do it out here, let me make this bigger and show you what people say. So people say wide pull-ups, okay, it's like the equivalent of a bicep curl and going like out here and finishing here and going, well, look at the distance, so like our biceps going to get absolutely massive. It will work, boys. I mean, a lot of stimulus at the end of the day, it will work, but like it's not correct. You want to drive your humerus towards where the origin, towards the insertion. Now with this, because you can get it closer, you get more range of motion. Because you get more range of motion, more distance traveled, you're able to connect with the working muscle. And funnily enough, it's more loadable. You will be stronger pulling like this, closer to the body, than you will be out here, pulling to here. But look at the distance, look at the gap. Because if that's all I can get to, look at the gap here. You don't want that. You want minimal gap, and you want to be able to drive the humerus towards the hip here. So again, comes down nice and slow, drag. Now, you may say, oh, you got straps on. The reason I have straps on is to really focus on this. If I've got straps on, I haven't even got my thumb wrapped around here, all right? So it means I'm not thinking about pulling from my hand. My hand is just connected to the tool, and I've literally managed to connect it via a strap. So then from there, all I'm now thinking of is drag elbow to hip. Let it stretch out, elbow to hip. Now, of course, when you do lat pull down, you're going to do this, but you're just going to double arm it. So it's double arm, elbow, down towards the hip. Boom, job done, lats complete. The next one we want to look at for the back is the traps. Now, traps are obviously a big boy muscle group, cover a lot of areas, and they have multiple insertion origin points and also functions as well. But what we'll break it down into is we'll start off with the upper section here that attaches to the neck, and you go to actually say it's probably more like that to there, okay? So the upper is simply to elevate the scapula. That's these 2 points here. So we know if we want to train this, we simply need to pull these points behind our ears. I haven't got a video. What I have been doing for the longest of time for this is cable shrugs. Because with the cable, it's coming down from in front of you, so you've got to come backwards in this way. As opposed to don't go straight down and up like that, because you'll just end up fucking looking like a weirdo. Instead, you want to pull up and back in that diagonal style fashion. If you haven't got cables, put a bench, put it slightly on an incline, rest your chest against it, and then use the dumbbells and shrug up and back. And that's how you're going to hit this upper portion. The mid portion, the goal of this is scapular retraction. This is to pull your scapulars backwards. And let's say it's going to be this portion here. So why this is important? If we want to train this, then we need to think about moving this first. And this is the example I'm going to show you. So to do our mid-trap back area, any form of row where the load is in line with the mid-traps. Now what people will do when they do this exercise is they will pull, again, the load from their hands, so then their elbow joint will close first, their biceps will start to burn like fuck, then they'll pull their shoulders back right at the end. So you're kind of doing it in reverse. You're trying to hit the target here, but you're going through this, and then hitting the target. We want to hit the target first. So how are you going to do that? Well, you're going to start off, and your first mission is to pull your shoulder blades back first. It's very subtle, and you may not even be able to see it here. But you see the little shrug of the shoulders? That's what gets all of this moving. Now, that is a very small movement. There to there, you could do this right now. There to there, retraction of the shoulders, very small movement. So what you're going to then use is your elbows to continuously drive them back to get more of a contraction. You're going to get your elbows in what's further back to create shoulder extension to then shorten this muscle as much as humanly possible. So if you go, we can do this together now. You shrug back, bang. You bring your elbows back. Feel it getting tighter until you're in that finished position. Then as a result, your hands are going to end up here anyway. Just like they would if you pulled from them first, but they're the last thing to move. On the way out, likewise, they're the first thing out, then the elbows, then the traps get stretched out. So that we always then release, keep the tension, pause, shrug, elbows, bang. Slow, pause, shrug, elbows, bang. And that's how you're going to train this muscle here. So what we're always thinking of bringing the origin and the insertion together at this point here. So if we went back to our image, we're thinking we need to drive these 2 points back as far as we can to begin with, and then we're going to shorten the muscle. The last one you're going to have is the lower traps, and that's depression of the scapula. So essentially moving the scapula downwards in this way. Now, this is not a common muscle group that gets trained from people that often. I have actually found a good way to train this is to row with the handle down lower so that when I do pull back, it hits this area here. But I'll be honest, this is not a main muscle group I'm looking to hit the lower traps. I'm mainly focusing on the big chunky part up here, and I'm going to get some adaptation from the rows that I'm doing in this. Because of like the bang for your buck reason for it. Like you can play about with it and you can lift like a crossbody cable and lift your arms up in a Y shape and you'll feel it get tighter. But it's a lot of fuckery and a lot of time that I'm not willing to invest just to grow that little portion. Maybe it will be in the future, but not right now. Overall, by the way, having stronger traps will allow you to stabilize the scapula, and that will allow you to then keep your shoulders back, which means when you come to pressing movements, it will be easier to drive the humerus towards the midline of the body because the muscles in the traps are actually looking after your scapula, which then allows you to press a lot more effectively. So don't miss out on traps. It's a pretty painful one to train, especially in this mid portion where your chest supported, but don't miss out on it. It's a big boy muscle group you want to spend time absolutely training it nice and hard. Next one we've got then is the delts. Obviously, you know the delts break down into 3 portions and the functions of each one. So we can see where it starts in and around this piece here, and it attaches nice and simple again to the humerus. So realistically, your goal when training this, and this doesn't need to be as complicated, but you need to think about bringing the humerus towards what we would call, you know, I've actually forgotten what this is called, but the bone up here, you can feel it like right now and you can touch it. That there, that's you're bringing your humerus towards that, okay? So don't think about your hands. When people do like lateral raises, they'll think about their hands coming up, their hands will be higher. Don't think about that. Just think about moving your upper arm in the direction that you need to hit the delt. So if you want to hit the front delt, you're simply going to raise your arm. That's going to shorten that part. If you want to hit the side, you're going to take your arm away from the body, okay, known as abduction. From there, if you want to hit the rear delts, you're going to move the arm behind the body, shoulder extension. And again, when else would we hit the rear delts? Really, really well, by the way, and really loadable is this exercise here. Look, bang. Look how short those rear delts are. Look how much load we're lifting. Don't get me wrong, the reverse pec deck fly, great exercise. I do that as well. But this here is going to put a lot of load through the rear delts. It's going to get it very short and it's going to get it put tension on in the lengthened position. So both, you know, this is useful for all of that because it runs in the same like fiber avenue as all the trap muscles do as well. Now, when it comes to training the lateral delts, let's go through that one. It's the main one that you're going to want to focus on. So this is an exercise I like to use to train them, but don't pay attention to the type of kit I'm using to train them, more how we're doing it. Because if I could be stood up with dumbbells, I could be sat on a seated machine with my chest supported, I could be led down doing cables. Don't worry about the exercise. We're not speaking about which length of the muscle we're training here. We're just thinking, what is the function of the lateral delts? So for here, we want to bring this portion towards this portion. It's short. We basically want to bring the bottom of my sleeve to where it meets the main piece of the t-shirt here. So with this, to do this effectively and to not hit your traps, you want to take your hands and you want to pull them down and you want to reach around as far as you possibly can. So reach the furthest way. And by doing this, your traps won't engage, because you only need to bring your humerus here towards the top of the shoulder. So it makes sense to take your arm and fully send it all the way out here. The opposite to what I was telling you to do when you were doing the chest exercise. I'm telling you, don't press all the way out here. Same with the lats. Don't come all the way up here onto the shoulder. You want to keep the muscle engaged. Now when we actually want to train the shoulder, you don't want to keep your arm sucked in, because feel that, you're just going to work your traps. You want to take your arm, reach as far away from you as can, pull it out of the socket, if you will, and then move up and down on that. If you just do that now, take your arm as far as you can, put it out in front of you, come out to the side, you'll feel that get insanely short, really, really quick and easy. So, again, don't think about your... try not to think about the hands, but the hands you are going to push downwards and away, but you're going to do that because then that's going to allow you to bring the humerus towards the top of the shoulder, shorten the life out of the delts, and you're going to get an insane, beautiful burn off the back of that. Let's move on to the next exercise. So next we've got the bicep, and this is a nice and simple one because you're only really going to move one, sometimes maybe two joints to train it. So with the bicep, the goal of the bicep is simply to bend the elbow, also known as like elbow flexion. Bang. That's it. Job done. Now the reason why you wouldn't just do it one movement for it, and you can play about with it, is you see where this piece here runs and it'll attach over the shoulder joint. So by putting your arm behind the body, it puts this on more of a stretch. So that's why. So you want to put your arm behind the body, and you can also put it in front of the body as well. But the same focus wants to be applied. You want to stabilize this to then shorten this. This always has to move for you to shorten the bicep. Of course it does. But this wants to be stable. But where I'm going with this is people won't stabilize this and then they'll move this. So you got both joints moving at the same time, and it's like you're trying to hit a moving target, and that's why your biceps aren't growing. Stabilize one end, shorten the other end. Nice and simple. So let's look at a movement for that. So I'm going to give you two movements. So let's think we want to put the arm behind the torso to begin with, and we're going to use something like a cable. The cable is going to keep it under load even in the lengthened position. But the goal here, keep this fixed, move the elbow joint. Keep this fixed, move the elbow joint. Towards the back end of the set, you're going to have, where you really start to struggle and this starts to fail, you're going to have the tendency for this to creep forward. If it's the last rep, I'm not going to get too out of bed about it, but like if you're doing it from the start and all this is moving, you're not like, the only goal here was to flex the elbow. Everything else, there's no reason for it to move. There is literally no reason. So the reason why people's biceps aren't growing is because they're globally getting the load from A to B, but they're not fixing everything else. So there's no wonder that there's not enough tension on the bicep, because you're distributing that tension across the whole body, which you obviously don't want to be doing. So this is the exercise you're going to do in order to train, you could say, the long head of the bicep, but both heads are going to be trained when you do this, let's be honest. Staying composed towards the back end of the set. And then the opposite of that is to put your arm now in front of the body, in front of your torso, in order to then train it. So here we've got like a preacher. I used to do it this way. I've actually gone back to doing it in this place here, and I'm enjoying the tension in the lengthened position with that. So this is food for thought on biceps. Two movements, one in front, one behind the body. But the goal simply is just to shorten this here, to bring this up, stabilize this side of the joint. And what's good about this is you can really wedge your shoulder in and lock in the origin part before you bring the insertion towards the origin. Nice and simple. That's how you're going to train your biceps. Now, like with biceps, triceps also very, very simple. The goal of the tricep is simply just to straighten your arm, or what's known as elbow extension. Now, why that's important is, and I tell you what, let's come straight on to the movement side of this. So why this is important, and I think where people go wrong with this is, you want to push this load down, right? Now you can push this load down globally by getting your weight over it, driving a bit from your shoulders, and obviously straightening out your arm. But with that, you're going to take tension away from the working muscle. And I've realized with this, it's much better to drop the load a little bit and be able to tense the tricep to straighten out the load. You won't be able to lift as much, of course you won't, but the function of the tricep was to straighten the arm. So use the tricep to straighten the arm. Don't get everything else involved to globally push the load down. Just simply think, all this is going to stay fixed. Humerus stays in line with the torso. The only goal is to straighten out the arm here. Let it stretch, 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 stretch. Pause, straighten out the tricep. Nice and steady on the way up. Pause, straighten out the tricep. Simple. Like, don't overcomplicate it. Don't let everything else globally take over. Towards your last reps, are you going to have to struggle and grind through? Of course you are. That's how you know your training's failure. But this doesn't want to be from like rep 1. I'm happy this last rep, when you're trying to like squeeze the life of everything out of it, it gets like that. But like, I'm not counting that as a proper rep. That's not a rep. That's just, let's take it to fucking failure. We're not going to record this one though. And then second to that, I found using tricep dips to be one of the greatest growers of the long head of the tricep. Now, with the long head, obviously, it's going to attach over your shoulder. Now, originally, I was doing overhead cable tricep extension like this, which is great, but it's not so loadable. With this here, and you bring your arm behind the body, it's still under the same amount of pressure, but it's now more loadable, and obviously, it's going to hit the lengthened position. Now, one thing with triceps, you want to do the opposite to what I was doing with chest, and I'll show you when we come down towards the bottom here. At this point here, this kind of looks like a chest press, right? It's pretty much the exact same position. If you were led on a bench, the load just coming down in your hands, maybe your hands would be a touch wider, cool. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to drive our humerus forwards to straighten out the elbow joint or to drive our upper arm towards our pecs. And you could do, right? And you're not going to totally switch the chest off in this. But what I want you to think about with this is I actually want you to press from your hands this time. You're going to press the load from your hands because your only goal is to straighten out the elbow joint. Whereas in the analogy of training your chest, your only goal is not to straighten out the elbow joint. Your only goal is to move your upper arm towards the center of your body. As a result, your arm will obviously straighten out. So here, you're going to let it stretch, pause, drive from the hands, straighten out the tricep. So this is going to work in the opposite to the other exercise. The first exercise is harder as you press it away. This exercise is harder as you lengthen the muscle here. Both are going to work nicely. I've paired these two together, and to be fair, I had pretty small triceps at the start of the year, and now they start to grow a bit bigger. So this is 23rd of June. I've not really done any videos on it since, so it's a little bit of an old video. Definitely leaner in this video as well, I'm not going to lie. The next one we're going to look at is the quads. So with the quads, look at the start. So it's going to run here from attaching on the hip. This is the rectus femoris, by the way, which is the big meaty part that you see across most people's legs. Obviously, the other portions don't all attach over the hip, but they all attach over the knee. They'll run over the knee joint and attach onto your patella tendon. So then the function of the quad is simply just to straighten your leg. Think of a leg extension. When you straighten your leg and it gets short, that is the function of the quad. So with that, you understand it on a leg extension. I'm not going to use that to explain the analogy. What I am going to use is something that is harder at the bottom. Okay, so the example we're going to use is a hack squat. Now you could use a back squat, a Smith machine back squat, a pendulum squat, but any form of squat. You can use a leg press, but this is why I've not used it for my example here. As good as a leg press is, what do we want if we want to train the quads? Well, we want to bend the knee as much as possible. And this is what people get wrong. They don't bend the knee enough. Therefore, they leave out some quad gains on the table. In a leg press, you're not going to be able to get your hamstring to your calf because your hip joint will close up too much because of the positioning of where your feet are. But here, this is perfect. We can close the knee joint as much as possible. Therefore, max tension on the quad. Now, this exercise is not hardest at the top. You know why? Because the joints are literally stacked on top of each other. There is minimal resistance. It is only hardest at the bottom. So you're going to spend a second here, pause, lengthen out the quad. And again, you're going to be able to lift the most amount of load here when you are in the lengthened position because you're stronger in the lengthened position than you are in the shortened position. That's why you can lift X amount of plates on this and not the same on a leg extension because you're just not as strong in the shortened position of the muscle. But why I make this point is the function of the quad is to bend the knee, okay? So from this point, you're then going to drive up, and this is where it's hardest, bang, 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 and then you shorten the muscle. But what we want to do, and the main message of this, is to fully close the knee joint as much as possible. Range of motion is one of your biggest friends in growing big fucking boy muscles. Next, we've got the hamstring. So the hamstring is obviously like two muscles, really, which run, they insert here behind the knee. So same principle as the quad, but they're not quite running over. It's like fat cancel. They run over like onto the back here. So what you want to understand, when you train this, if you can bend your hip, it's going to lengthen this even more. So you could say like a seated hamstring curl would be better than a lying. Both are going to work really well, to tell you the truth. But a really good exercise you can use for your hamstrings, because bear in mind, we want to almost replicate what we've just done here. Train the muscle, the strong big boy muscle, in the lengthened position under load, and we know if it runs over our hip, we want to put it into even more stretch. So this is how we're going to do that. The exercise we're going to do is an RDL. So with this, thinking about the origin of the insertion point, remember when I said you want to fix one side or the other and both don't want to be moving? In this analogy, we're going to flip the script. We're actually going to stabilize where it inserts onto, here. So it inserts just over behind the knee. Now this is going to be a soft bend of the knee, and we're going to lock in there, we're not going to move, which means we want to then move from our hips. So from here, you're just going to push your hips back, and you're going to pause. Now at this point, the hamstring, which is somewhere buried underneath the glute, is going to be running over, and then down, and then fixed here. So at this point, it's under max tension in the lengthened position. The most loadable point, again, because you can lift more on this exercise than you can than a hamstring curl because you're stronger in the lengthened position. But to do this, you're going to simply think, and this is also, I'm kind of going to cover glutes on this. I wasn't going to cover glutes, but like, to train the glutes, you essentially need to extend and flex the hip. So the same principle would apply. You're stronger as you bend the joint, as you flex it, as you come into the lengthened position. Here, you're stretching out the glute, you're stretching out the hamstring. Then you're going to drive the load back up, you're shortening. No resistance at the top, really, apart from for the traps that are holding the load. And you're going to push the hips back, pause, and drive up. Now with this, you're still bringing the origin and the insertion together, but you've just flipped it in reverse for this analogy that we've got on here. And that's how you're going to train your hamstrings in the lengthened position for max load and max gains. So the last one we're going to touch on is the abs. Now the function of the abs is simply just to flex the spine or bend the spine. So with the abs, you're actually, all you really need to think of is where does it start? Where does it insert onto? And all I need to do is actually bring these 2 points together. And that's it. It's nice and simple. Now the hip joint is here. This is how most people think to train their abs. They'll just do sit-ups. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And what's happening here? The torso is not really changing in length. It will still work. Why? Because at this point here, or even let's go halfway down, the weight of your head, the weight of all of this up here is being stabilized in an isometric contraction like this, like a plank where the muscle isn't changing in length. And that's how you're working your core in general. Nice, cool. But the majority of the work is being done by the hip flexors, coming up and down, up and down, up and down. Okay, so how do we want to fix this? I'm not going to send you on a goose chase to my YouTube channel, but what I'm going to do is I actually made a full, a short on this. So what I speak about here is pretty much what I've just told you. In terms of building thick and blocky abs, you don't want to be sitting up and down from the hip flexor, like most motherfuckers are doing here. Now, this is how we want to approach it, okay? So in a second, he's going to go down to the bottom. Now what you want to be thinking about is, to train the abs, we simply needed to flex the spine, which means we need to round and curl ourselves up, which means all we need to think about is actually stacking our top abs against our bottom abs, crunching them like so, shortening them together. Get the ribs to touch the hips. Nice and simple, nice and simple. That's your only goal. Get these 2 points to touch together. Get these 2 points to touch together. So the movement's not going to be big. It's not going to be big at all. You're going to sit up, and it's not going to be a big movement. You'll breathe out, you'll shorten, not put the tension on the hips. Pause, you'll come back down. Breathe out, breathe out, breathe out, breathe out, breathe out. Pause, keep the tension on. It's not on the hips there, okay? And at that point, it's a small movement. So with this, you will, the best example I could use is like a half sit. So you're just going to breathe out and round your upper spine to get this contraction, boom, it's short, and then lengthen back out. Now from there is exercises that are loadable ab exercises, and you're going to need to progress to that to train it like a hypertrophy muscle group. But the function, look at this fucking face, but the function of the abs is to simply flex the spine and shorten up, so don't be sitting up and down from the hips. So that's going to conclude the video on how to actually lift weights to grow muscle. The thesis here is to bring the origin and the insertion together under load, understanding where the muscle starts, where it finishes, and what the function is, so that then we can drive from A to B, be direct, be efficient, and then actually lift weights to grow muscle. If you found it of value, great, subscribe. If you want to work with me, great, book a call, and I'll see you tomorrow.